Dr. Sharif Abdullah offers a unique, hopeful, and visionary perspective on the persistent challenges of our time. His perspective is shaped by his urban upbringing of poverty and violence, his Ivy League education, and his work with impacted communities in America and in 45 countries around the world. His spiritual outlook is rooted in the consciousness of dozens of religions, faith traditions, and spiritual practices. Sharif offers this unique viewpoint, helping us chart a course that explains where we've been, where we are now, and how we get to a positive future that works for all living beings.
Hello, Sharif here. And today I'm going to continue the conversation that I started looking at how we are overly focused on things that are less important than we'd like to believe, overly focused on things the media wants us to be focused on, and way under focused on the things that are actually driving us and driving our society in terms of pushing it, and under focused on the pull, the vision for the society that we want to live in. I want to remind you, and I'll put this up really quickly, that part of the thing that we are focused on, that Commonway is focused on, is what I call the 12 global challenges. This is to get our minds and our hearts out of the middle-class American dilemma and start looking at what the rest of the world looks like, and looking at open ourselves to the possibility that there can be a profound change in how we see the world and how we act in the world. That all of the things that we are facing right now is driving us to that profound change. That things like our security issue around the world, things like food, water, energy, I call those the big four. If you don't get those right, you don't even get to work on the other ones. By getting us out of how the world is affecting Americans, how we're affecting each other, getting us to look at how we can be of service to other human beings, how we can be of service to all living beings, how we can be of service to the entire world. This is an interesting call. It's a call not for us to focus on any one thing, but focus on the big picture. Part of focusing on that big picture is something that I call a spiritual revolution. It's time for us to have a revolution. We're busy fighting each other and not recognizing that we have an opportunity for all of us to pull together in the same direction, for all of us to pull together in such a way that we all can hold a common vision. I'd say that the majority of the people, something like 85% of the people who are watching this video right now consider themselves members of Commonway right now, consider themselves menders, consider themselves practicing inclusivity. I'd say somewhere around 85% of them would think of themselves as being part of the left, being progressives, etc. And the others think of themselves as being on the right, and being conservatives. The notion of inclusivity is above and beyond those petty differences that get emphasized in our society. The way that Commonway transcends them is by having transcending language, by recognizing the only way we're going to get anywhere is together. That the so-called fundamental splits are not that fundamental when you recognize that we're all in the same boat, the boat's going down, we have to rescue each other. something that happened years ago in the last really big earthquake in San Francisco. During that earthquake, the 880 expressway, which was a 2-layer expressway, pancaked down on itself. The people on the bottom deck were trapped in their cars when the top deck collapsed. And for people who know the San Francisco area, the 880 expressway went through some very poor, very ethnic communities. And people in those communities climbed up into the wreckage, even when everything is still shaking. And they climbed up there in order to rescue other human beings. When they got to a smashed car, they didn't ask, oh, are you Republican or Democrat? Because I'm only going to rescue Democrats. They weren't asking, oh, are you white? Are you black or Hispanic? We're only rescuing Hispanics. This is an Hispanic neighborhood. The only thing that mattered at that time was that they were human beings. And our humanness, which comes out of us in times of crisis, our humanness transcends all of that. Now, the only reason we're not doing that is that we don't believe that there's a crisis. Let me make that a little bit more explicit. The only reason you're not doing it is that you don't believe there's a crisis. You think that you can focus on sub-issues until a real issue comes to you, and then all of a sudden, you haven't built the connecting tissue that you can build to connect with other human beings. You should be building connecting tissue right now. Are you building that tissue or are you tearing it apart? What I'm talking about is a fundamental change in how you think of the world. The people that you think of as the problem are part of your solution. If you're opening yourself to that solution, you're going to find it. If you're closing them off and acting like those people are the problem, then they're going to be that. They're going to act that way, and the solution that's waiting for us will slip through our fingers. What I'm suggesting is a revolution, and it's a certain kind of revolution that I want to talk to you about. The Dalai Lama put this very, very clearly years ago. And I'd like to read to you from what the Dalai Lama said in his talks and in his writings. And I'm going to weave a couple of mine in there so you could see that this is a very common common thread and a common situation that we're facing. So the Dalai Lama said, when I speak about spiritual revolution, I regard myself not as a Buddhist, not as the Dalai Lama, not as a Tibetan, but rather as one human being. Just want to pause there for a second and say, when the people were crawling up into the wreckage of the 880 expressway, risking their lives for people they have never seen, they weren't doing that saying, I'm a hero and I'm a rescuer. They weren't doing that saying, oh, they're going to give me this fantastic reward because I'm doing this. They were simply acting as one human being, which is all that all of us can do. The Dalai Lama goes on to say, spirituality I take to be concerned with those qualities of the human spirit, such as love and compassion, patience, tolerance, forgiveness, contentment, a sense of responsibility, a sense of harmony, which bring happiness to both self and others. The spiritual practice involves, on the one hand, acting out of concern for others' well-being. On the other, it entails transforming ourselves so that we become more readily disposed to do so. To speak of spiritual practice in any terms other than these is meaningless. That's my emphasis there. But I think that that is important in our times. A lot of us get turned off by so-called spiritual people because they're so, let's just say, out there. They're so wrapped up in their own demonstrations that they stop acting out of concern for others' well-being. The Dalai Lama goes on to say, my call for a spiritual revolution is thus not a call for a religious revolution, nor is it a reference to a way of life that is somehow otherworldly. Rather, it is a call for a radical reorientation away from our habitual preoccupation with self. It is a call for a radical reorientation away from the media, a radical reorientation away from the comfortable issues presented by our progressive or by our conservative agendas. In all of this, I am saying that we live in a society where many of us are spiritually starved. We don't know how to feed the hunger for the sacred. The hunger for the sacred is actually good. It is the urge that propels us toward wanting to understand the mystery, to understand and seek our transcendent reality. And by the way, let me interrupt myself for a second. I talk an awful lot about the hunger for the sacred in my book, Creating a World That Works for All. If you haven't gotten it yet, you should get it. I go on to say, the problem isn't that we know how to feed the hunger. Many of us try to feed our hunger with drugs, with entertainment, and when those don't work, with suicide. We've learned how to feed our addictions. We've learned how to feed our delusions, but we don't know how to feed our spirit. We feed the hunger for the sacred through practicing compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, all those other things the Dalai Lama talked about. The antidote to spiritual starvation is inclusivity. The Dalai Lama goes on to say, a revolution is called for, certainly, but not a political, an economic, or even a technical revolution. We have had enough experience of these during the past century to know that a purely external approach will not suffice. What I propose is a spiritual revolution. I'm saying that my work is my spiritual path, a spiritual calling dressed in the language of the practical. I don't wear any special robes. I don't speak in foreign tongues. I don't keep a solemn expression most of the time. My focus is inclusivity, teaching the theory, philosophy, and practice of the inextricable linkage between our individual lives and the other. The Dalai Lama's call for a spiritual revolution based on love and compassion, forgiveness, and the other values is a call for a revolution based on inclusivity. These revolutions are one and the same. The great movements of the last 100 years or more, democracy, liberalism, socialism, have all failed to deliver the universal benefits they were supposed to provide, despite many wonderful ideas. The time has come for a different approach. Of course, it is very difficult to achieve such a worldwide movement for peace of mind, but it is the only alternative. Our actual enemy, you see, is within ourselves. The afflicted emotions, pride, anger, jealousy, are our real enemies. When people face you with guns and ammunition, when people face you with anger on their faces, when they're pelting your car with rocks, etc., you can begin to believe that that is your enemy. It's not. If you believe that that's your enemy, then that's someone you can move away from, And many of us, I mean, millions and millions of Americans are leaving the sinking ship right now. Millions and millions of folks are going out to places like Ecuador and Costa Rica and other countries, and they're carrying the seed inside of them of spiritual starvation. They're carrying spiritual starvation into a more pristine environment so they can mess that one up. Some of us are building spaceships and are trying to get to other planets to take our spiritual starvation to the moon, to take our spiritual starvation to Mars. If we actually care about this planet and maybe even other planets, we're going to fix the stuff that's happening down here. And then I'm going to fix my relationship with all others. And by all others, I don't mean my favorite others. I mean the ones that you don't particularly like. Once you do that, and once you start the process, first of all, you're going to be on a true spiritual path. Second of all, you're going to start first seeing the vision. I'm saying first seeing the real problem, not the ones that the media is contriving and throwing at you. And then you're going to start seeing the real vision, the vision of the society that's lying very, very quiet and very, very dormant in your heart, in all of our hearts, and we'll be able to act on that that policy. We're going to be able to act on that vision and to be able to act for the first time truly as though creating a world that works for all is serious and is our primary goal. One more part to this series that is going to be coming up in our next session. So thank you. Don't forget to like it. Don't forget to subscribe to it. Don't forget to forward it to somebody else and ask them to like and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
You are invited to participate in the discussions and activities that will define a positive future for all. We are at the cusp of the expansion of our human consciousness beyond the limitations of our past. Together, we can envision a world that embraces our human potential. Together, we can create a world that can truly work for all living beings.